very necessary for people at some point in their life to dedicate themselves to a single game of some sort, which is kind of what you're doing in university. You know, you have to become one thing at some point in your life, and the sacrifice, of course, is that you give up all the other things that you could become, but you don't really have a choice, because if you don't decide voluntarily to become one thing, you know, to become a disciplined adherent of some specific practice or profession or viewpoint, then you risk just aging chaotically, and you don't get away with not aging. So you might as well age into something that's actually something, rather than just remaining, or then just becoming an old child, which is really not a good thing. It's not a good thing to see, especially by the time people hit about 40. It's not pretty for them or anyone else. And even at 30, it's getting pretty old at that point. 40, it's like it's almost irreparable at 40. And the reason for that is you start running out of opportunities. When you're young and stupid, people don't care, because they think, well, you know, whatever. You've got decades of possibility still ready to unfold in you. But if you're in the same unspecified position at 40, people are much less forgiving, especially because if they're going to hire someone who doesn't know what's going on, or employ them, or engage them in some sort of productive activity, they might as well take a chance on someone young and full of potential, rather than someone who's really lived more than half of their life already, because of course you have by the time you're 40. Okay, so you come to university in roughly the same state as Pinocchio. You know, you're a bit of a puppet, and you're kind of a jackass, and what the hell do you know? And it's chaotic, because you haven't found your place in the world properly. And I don't mean merely for career, not that that's not relevant, because it is, but it's more important than that. It's because you're a historical creature, because you are a product of history. Unless you are enculturated properly, which means you understand your past, and in the sense that the humanities can allow for that, then you haven't been able to incorporate the wisdom of your ancestors into your day-to-day pursuits, and that's going to make you weak. That's the idea anyways. And so when you come to university, this is what university is for. It's so that you can go into the chaos, and you can pull something out of it that's truly of value. And you can incorporate that in your own personality, and that makes you much, much stronger, like literally stronger, not more educated, but it's not like you know more facts. It's that you literally are a better person, and better means you can do far more things. You can articulate that's something that's of crucial importance, is that you can articulate yourself properly, which is more useful than anything else you could possibly manage. Like if you guys come out of university capable of making coherent arguments and using language properly, you're so powerful that it's ridiculous. You can lay out a strategy and pursue it successfully. And maybe the strategy is actually oriented towards something good, something that will actually work for you and work for other people as well. And I don't really understand why people aren't told this when they come to university, is that your goal is to make yourself as articulate in writing and thinking and speaking as you possibly can, because that opens the door to everything that you'll want to do in the future, no matter what it is. The more articulate person always rises, always, because they lay out strategies more effectively. They lay out the reasons for doing something or for not doing something more particularly. They convince people, and properly so, that they can grapple with potential that lies ahead effectively. And they can defend themselves when they're challenged. And so all of that is going into the past, into the chaos of the past, you could even say, and pulling up the spirit that inhabits that from the bottom and uniting with it. And if you don't do that, well, you're defenseless in the face of the tragedy of life. And then that's not so good, because if you're defenseless in the face of the tragedy of life, then you get way more hurt than you would otherwise get, and so do the people around you. And then the probability that you're going to be resentful and bitter about that is really high, because no one likes to fail continually. And then you get bitter and resentful, and then once you're bitter and resentful, well, being vengeful and mean is the next step. It doesn't take much of a transformation to move you from that place to the next. One of the things that I would recommend that you do as students in this course, and maybe in every course, speaking of industriousness, is come up with a plan of attack for the course and use a scheduler. You know, if you treat your university career like a full-time job, you're much more likely to succeed. And if you keep up on the readings and you keep up on the essays and all of that, then you're much less likely as well to fall into despair when you get too far behind. Using a Google Calendar or something like that to organize a schedule for the entire semester at the beginning of the semester can be invaluable, especially if you're not very industrious, because it can keep you on track. And one of the things we know about industrious people is that they are very good at using schedules and at planning the use of their time. I would like to say that you should all be smarter, but I don't know how you could be smarter. We don't know anything about how to improve intelligence, and I suppose we don't really know anything about how to improve industriousness either, but I can tell you that people who are industrious come up with a strategy for solving the problem that's ahead of them, and then they do whatever they can to stick to the strategy. And so, for example, if you sat down today or tomorrow for a couple of hours, 3 hours, and you filled in a Google Calendar, whatever you happen to use, with a strategy for studying and a list of when all your assignments are due and all of that, and when you're going to sit down and study, then you won't be in a position where you have to cram for 10 hours a day hopelessly right before, you know, an important exam. It's also a very ineffective way of studying, by the way. I mean, first of all, people who cram for 10 hours say they're studying for 10 hours, but they rarely are because, well, I can't study for 10 hours. I don't have the power of concentration that would enable me to do that for that prolonged period of time. I can manage about 3 hours of intense intellectual activity before I'm pretty done. And it's also the case that if you study and then sleep and then study and then sleep and then study and then sleep, you space it out, then you're much more likely to remember. It's also much more likely that you're much more likely to remember if you try to recall the material, and so highlighting and that sort of thing isn't very useful, but reading, closing the book, summarizing what you've read without opening the damn book, that's useful. And the reason for that is that you're practicing remembering, and that's what you have to practice. If you're practicing memorization, you have to practice remembering. You don't just go over the thing over and over. That'll help you with recognition memory, but it won't help you with recall memory.